Good morning. You're watching All You Need to Know on Bloomberg Quint Live, India's first digital live streaming business news service. I am Agam Akil. Here are the headlines. US President Donald Trump extends the China tariff deadline, citing significant progress in the latest round of negotiations. Stocks in Asia see a modest lift. Theresa May postpones the final vote on her Brexit deal once again. The new deadline is set on March 12, just 17 days, or rather before Brexit Day. And GST Council lowers the tax rate on under-construction properties to 5% from the current 12% without input tax credit. The new rates will be applicable from the 1st of April. Uber is in talks to sell its food delivery application Uber Eats to rival Swiggy. Sources tell Bloomberg that a deal could be sealed within the coming weeks. And US stocks closed higher on Friday, with the Dow logging its longest weekly winning streak in over 2 decades. Optimism on the trade front and dovish signals from the US Federal Reserve have driven the recent gains and left indices well above their lows of December. Bloomberg's Abigail Doolittle sums up all the Wall Street action in this report.
Stocks climbed in Friday's Wall Street session on optimism that the U.S. and China may just reach a trade deal over the weekend. On this, we had the S&P 500 up about 0.6%, the Dow up 0.7%, the tech-heavy Nasdaq outperforming up about 0.9%. Now, on the week, each of the major averages up once again for both the Dow and the Nasdaq, 9 up weeks in a row. For the Dow, that's matching a streak all the way back in 1995. So the risk rally we're seeing in 2019, putting the Dow in territory that had last been in 1995 in the middle of a big bull market. This time might be a little bit different considering all the volatility, but on the day and on the week, certainly bullish action. And on that bullish action on the day, not surprisingly, 9 of the 11 S&P 500 sectors trading higher. Up top, technology on bottom, the consumer staples relative to technology really helped out by Intuit, the tech software company, up 6.7% on a strong quarter. We also had Western Digital and Seagate, those storage companies, up more than 4%. Microsoft up for a second day, the biggest boost for the S&P 500 once again. Continued follow through on bullish comments from Morgan Stanley on Thursday, but hurting the S&P 500, the consumer staple space, not down a lot, down about 0.3%, but a big drag there. Kraft Heinz absolutely plunging, down 27%, its lowest level ever on a very disappointing quarterly report where they posted a loss. The outlook was not inspiring, to say the least, and they did take a $14.5 billion write-down of their brand. So investors selling those shares en masse. Now, interestingly, stocks rallied, but so too did bonds. This is some of the Fed officials were out there with some dovish talk, helping rates go down just a little bit. But even with bonds rallying, the bigger tone on the day was the gains we saw for stocks. Friday's Wall Street session, then, was risk on. In New York, Abigail Doolittle, Bloomberg News.
Staying with the U.S., President Donald Trump will hold off raising tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars in Chinese imports after what he called a very productive trade talks. And tariffs have been scheduled to jump from 10 to 25% next Saturday, but Trump agreed to postpone that increase in hopes of negotiating more comprehensive trade agreement. Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie has this report.
This isn't, of course, a major surprise, given what we heard from President Trump just in the last week or so in terms of the optimism from him in terms of these negotiations. But, of course, it is a major step potentially towards a deal now. You've had this tariff deadline, March the 1st, lifted or extended by the US. That would have increased, by the way, those tariffs from 10 to 25% on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods. And as you say, President Trump suggesting that now we're looking at a meeting between the two leaders at some point. We've heard from others in the administration at some point, potentially by the middle or end of March at Mar-a-Lago. So certainly more optimism. It's interesting that contrast with some of the more nuanced comments that we got out of USTR Lighthizer over the weekend, who said that there were still major hurdles between the two sides. And of course, our reporting suggesting that one of those hurdles was a disagreement around the enforcement of any deal on the yuan. Of course, the US have been pushing the Chinese to say that they will keep the yuan stable because the US are concerned that should they devalue it, that it would mitigate the impact of tariffs. And apparently the enforcement mechanism, there are still details that need to be ironed out from that, and that has remained an area that the two sides need to close the gap on. But in other fronts, Trump saying that they've made progress on things like intellectual property, enforced tech transfer, services, agriculture as well. So clearly the president sees that there has been enough progress to extend this deadline.
Now let's take a look at Asian markets. We have Bloomberg's Rosalind Chin, as usual, joining us from the Hong Kong studio live. Rosalind, good morning.
Well, of course, as you can imagine, everything is about trade this morning, and we do see the Asian stocks reflecting that optimism here. So we have the MSCI Asia Pacific Index making gains of more than 0.5%. Most of the markets, in fact, broadly speaking, in Asia are making gains, pulling higher. So the Nikkei is making gains of 0.65, Topix up by 0.7. Kospi actually is almost flat, but it is actually in positive territory. Hang Seng and the Shanghai Composite opening just a few moments ago. Hang Seng up by 1/3%. Shanghai Composite is up by 1.3%, and the CSI 300 up by 1.5%. So as you can see, this news about the pushing back of the tariffs, the US tariffs on Chinese goods, really giving a boost to stocks here. Now, we do see, though, that the yuan and the Aussie dollar also took a bit of a jump as well. The Aussie dollar jumping to about to more than 71 cents, 71 US cents there. Now it's at 71.56 cents. We've also got the yuan, offshore yuan, that took a jump as well to the highest so far in 2019. The onshore yuan also strengthening on the back of that news as well. Now, we do have a few sort of more ameliorating words, though, from JP Morgan, because they're saying, as the market's been moving towards a view about the trade discussions, the extension of the trade truce may not offer a significant boost to stocks. So we may see a little later in the session some of these gains starting to be paired a little bit slightly, if what JP Morgan says is true. Asian stocks, of course, at the moment are set to match the longer streak of daily gains in a year. And just finally, a look at Australia, the S&P ASX 200 making gains of about 0.1%. Now, the Aussie dollar, as I mentioned, strengthening there against most, in fact, of the G10 currencies, or all of them, when the news of the Donald Trump's tweet became apparent earlier on. Back to you.
Rosalind, thank you so much for bringing us those updates. But moving over back to Europe, with just 33 days left until Britain is set to leave the European Union, Prime Minister Theresa May has again delayed a parliamentary vote on her Brexit deal. In a desperate effort to buy more time to revise its terms with Brussels, Kathleen Hayes of Bloomberg News has more details in this report.
Sunday was a very, very busy day for Brexit, because she has now announced that there'll be no meaningful vote on Brexit until March 12th. Again, that's just a couple of weeks, 17 days out of the March 29 deadline. And of course, there still may be a vote this week on February 27th, which was going to give them a chance to vote on the deal. Now it may be a chance for her opponents to put some of their ideas on the table about what needs to be done to get a deal that can get passed. It has certainly been a rocky road for Theresa May. Let's just review what happened to her over the last couple of months. January, that vote where her deal was crushed, 432 to 202 in the House of Commons, the worst defeat for any prime minister in recent British history. The Irish backstop has still not been hammered out. UK politicians, though, are increasingly worried about a no-deal Brexit. That's no surprise. And this saying that she wants to have the meaningful vote on the deal March 12th, people, maybe that's just a negotiating tactic. She gets us so close to the deal, we have to vote yes. This is what people are wondering. 3 UK cabinet ministers, these are members of her own party, her cabinet, wrote a joint article on Saturday saying that they are going to have to oppose any kind of deal, or any mention that there could be a no-deal Brexit. And of course, she did say in so many words that she'll be ready to punish Brexit rebels, although she hasn't threatened anything definite yet.
Right then, let's take a look at our own markets and what we can expect moving into trade today. Based on what we've seen in terms of the SGX Nifty, and that should come up to you for you on your screen, we're absolutely flat at this point in time. But when it comes to our markets, last Friday, where was the largely range-bound, ended the day with flat moves, but the mid-cap and the small-cap indices did outperform. And when it comes to the banking indices, well, mixed cues coming in. So while the PSU banking index did show some strength, there was weakness in the Nifty banking index. American depository receipts of Tata Motors and Vedanta gained quite substantially, but on the losing end, We also have, actually we don't have too much, but marginal weakness, or rather marginal moves from Infosys and HDFC Bank as well. And you know, this FI number this time around looks much more higher at around 6,300 crores, but this is largely on account of Kotak Mahindra bulk deals. And if you leave that aside, we've also seen DIIs buy into the markets. Now, again, when it comes to stocks which were on the radar, was essentially Kotak Mahindra Bank, HDFC Bank and Reliance Industries. Indian Oil Corp did well to keep and provide some sort of support to the indices. But when it comes to the futures and options space, well, a continuation of a trend, if you may, considering we have seen another drop in open interest for the Nifty futures, and the Nifty banking futures, again, looking at a decline of 7.5%. But of course, we're in expiry week now, so we're going to have plenty of, well, you know, other variables which will play out. For now, looking at a 300-odd point range within which you can expect the Nifty to move within. And moving on to your most active options, last Friday we have writing around the 10,700 put and unwinding in the same call as well. Now, coming down to your VIX, it has cooled off quite substantially by as much as nearly 4%, below the mark of 15.5. So that should certainly be a positive welcome for the traders out there, with the Nifty put call ratio, well, mostly around the same mark at around 1.37, and the Nifty banking put call ratio coming off to a certain extent to around 1.08. But of course, the long list of stocks in ban remains with Adani Enterprises, Adani Power, Allahabad Bank, and well, IDBI Bank and Jet Airways also in the F&O ban, along with Reliance Power and PC Jeweler. But the two stocks which moved out of the F&O ban, or rather three, pardon me, that's Kaveri Seed Company, Reliance Capital and Reliance Infra. So watch out for these as we move into trade today. And besides them, of course, we're keeping an eye on Arvind, which continues to show more and more weakness at around mark of 75. BEML is the other one which is buzzing in trade, but on the gaining end, and fresh long seen in Piramal Enterprises. And moving on to your stocks which are seeing unwinding, Yes Bank, United Breweries, also seeing, or Yes Bank particularly here, stands out in terms of short covering. So we'll be watching out for that. But now let's see what's making headlines across the globe. Sukhin of Bloomberg News brings us the first word headlines.
We're going to start with Theresa May, who has again delayed a parliamentary vote on her Brexit deal, but says it will happen by March 12th. That's a little more than 2 weeks before the UK is due to leave the European Union. Now, she's in Egypt now for the EU Arab Nation Summit and will again attempt to win concessions for her deal. But some EU officials say Brexit could be delayed by as much as 21 months if no agreement is reached before March 29th. Meanwhile, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is in the middle of a 2-day rail journey to Vietnam for his second meeting with President Trump. His train has crossed into China but has been traveling at a very slow rate due to being heavily fortified. Kim is expected to travel by car from the China-Vietnam border. His trip to Hanoi will be the first by a North Korean leader in half a century, with his grandfather being the last to visit in 1964. Additional sanctions may be imposed on Venezuela when regional leaders meet in Colombia later on Monday. Now, this comes as clashes are erupted between supporters of President Nicolas Maduro and his rival Juan Guaido. And this is when attempts to deliver American humanitarian aid failed. Now, President Maduro has said all of this was a cover for a U.S. invasion. Juan Guaido is set to meet U.S. Vice President Mike Pence at the talks in Bogota. And voters in Okinawa have rejected plans to expand a U.S. Marine base. Local people were asked to approve a government-backed land reclamation scheme that would have allowed the base to move from a city center camp to a remote coastal area. The NHK and Kyoto both report exit polls show that the question was defeated. The referendum, though, is non-binding, and earlier this month, the government said the result would not affect its plans. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sue Keenan. This is Bloomberg.
GST Council has approved lowering of GST rate for the real estate sector, a move which is intended to give boost for the real estate sector by increasing sales. the GST Council has lowered GST on under construction properties to 5% from 12%, and for affordable housing projects, GST has been reduced from 8% to 1%. The benefit of input tax credit that could be availed by developers earlier will no longer be available to developers. The GST Council has also widened the definition of affordable housing projects. A flat or a house with 60 square meter of carpet area in a metro city and 90 square meter carpet area in a non-metro city with a price cap of 45 lakh rupees will come under an affordable housing project. Both these conditions of carpet area and the price will have to be met for a project to be classified as an affordable housing project. The rate changes will be effective from April 1, 2019, and the rate changes are revenue neutral, implying that the government will not incur any revenue loss due to these tax changes.
For affordable housing, 1% for non-affordable housing, 5% both without ITC, and a capping of 45 lakh. And for the metro, 60 square meter, and for non-metro, 90 square meter, and a capping of 45 lakhs. That is the main decision of the GST Council. And a lot of this discussion is going on. 1 April.
We must understand that why I said 1%. Because Government of India's own research shows that the tax incidence across states averages to 0.76%. So my justification was very solid, and I'm happy that the Honorable Union Finance Minister and the GST Council have accepted my submission for the sake of affordable housing. It's very important that our fight was on affordable housing should not be discriminated. Group of ministers had proposed 3%. I felt that would punish affordable housing. And I'm very glad that today GST Council, chaired by Union Finance Minister, has agreed with my proposal, officially written to the Union Finance Minister on the 21st of this month.
Now, affordable housing, we also adopted certain definitions. So it would mean, say, houses with less than 60 square meters in the metros and 90 square meters in the non-metro area, subject to a cost limit of 40 lakh rupees.
45 lakhs or 40?
40. So that is the
answer. Other ministers are saying 45. Other ministers are saying 45 lakhs.
Maybe that. I mean, yes, lots of numbers will be handed out. I think the Union Finance Minister, what he announced, will be the one.
So what about lottery? Your state had a...
Well, lottery, it was not discussed in the GO thoroughly because Kerala, Punjab and Bengal were absent. And therefore it has been decided after long discussion to refer it back to GOL.
Thank you.
We will have, because regarding the realty sector, there are many procedural issues involved, very complicated. And therefore it was decided the officials will continue to work on it. But things are procedural only, therefore they would be determined by a video conference.
When will this be?
April 1st will come into effect.
Okay. April 1st, another VC meeting is what you're saying?
Before that, by March 10th, another video conference will take place.
Yeah.
And by 15th, we will be able to issue the notice.
Yeah.
Today's decision is a very landmark decision where now the flat buyers will have to pay only 5% for normal housing and 1% for affordable housing. And the way this affordable housing definition has been approved, it is going to cover a major portion of housing, particularly in the non-metros areas, and also in the metro areas at the expanding locations. So this is going to benefit the flat buyers, and it is also going to benefit the real estate sector, where the flat buyers were postponing their decisions and waiting for the completion because the impression was that, and because on completed flat there is no GST, and therefore they were postponing the decisions, and that is why under construction flats were not being sold, and that was leading to a kind of the cash flow and then the stress in the real estate sector. Now, if this decision is going to be win-win for both the flat buyers as well as the real estate sector. The flat buyers will also benefit, because in the existing scheme of 12% and 8% with ITC, there were we were receiving the complaints saying that the developers were not passing the benefit of the input tax credit by reducing their price to the consumers. Now what has happened is that this scheme ensures that 5% and 1% has already taken care of the input tax credit, right? And therefore that benefit gets automatically passed on to the consumers.
Let's look at the stocks that we need to watch out for today. Syndicate Bank files insolvency plea against State Trading Corporation of India for rupees 625 crores. Suzlon Energy clarifies that it is exploring multiple options for debt reduction along with its lenders and won't comment on market speculation. 98% of Jet Airways shareholders vote in favor of conversion of loan into shares, increase in authorized share capital, and to alter the Articles of Association in extraordinary general meeting. The company says additional 2 aircrafts have been grounded due to non-payment of amounts outstanding to lessors under their respective lease agreements. Then let's look at the takeaways from Reliance Power investors meet. Thermal portfolio of Reliance Power operated at 81% PLF versus national average of 62% PLF. Expects to achieve resolution of regulatory issue aggregating to rupees 5,000 crores. And company says it is financed conservatively with debt equity ratio of 1.4 times. Motilal Oswal Financial Services and IIFL Holding explore legal options on SEBI order related to NSCL scam. The company believes that the order will have no impact on overall business activities of group companies. GVK Power and Infra. GVK Power to acquire 13.5% stake of Mumbai International Airport Limited from Bidwest for rupees 1,247 crores. The company will acquire 16.2 crore equity shares at rupees 77 each. Post-acquisition, GVK will hold 64% stake in MIAL. Adani Ports to acquire Adani Agri Logistics Limited from Adani Enterprises Limited for a cash consideration of 946 crores. The deal is expected to complete by March 31st, 2019 and is subject to regulatory approvals. The deal will not require approval of minority shareholders as the acquisition is done through the wholly owned subsidiary Adani Logistics Limited. Adani Ports will also take in net debt of close to 700 crores on its books. The enterprise value of this deal is close to 1,662 crores.
This is Megakai Pluto, the world's largest bee, and something I've dreamed of seeing for about 9 years.
Now, there's lots to talk about over the course of the day, and you will find all the live market action on Bloomberg Quint. There are also a few stories that you should consider reading on our website, bloombergquint.com. Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched the ambitious Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi scheme, transferring the first installment of 2,000 crores each to over 1 crore farmers. And auto component manufacturers have approached the government seeking imposition of minimum import price on aluminium alloy wheels for two-wheelers imported from China, citing difficulties faced by the domestic industry. And that's a wrap on this edition of All You Need to Know. Stay tuned to Bloomberg Quint for more news and updates.